Hello, my name is Cooney, and I am here to talk about the Kickstarter Sword and Sonnet, which will be an anthology of battle poets featuring women and non-binary battle poets. It's very exciting, and it inspired me to start thinking about the role of a poet during war. I'm especially inspired by Aram Saroyan's Four Monologues, which is about four Russian poets dealing under the Stalinist regime and the consequences therefrom. I I have much to think about and much to say about what a poet is during a war and under a tyrannical regime, and what poetry does in opposition to that. Something to set against all that, as Charlotte Gray says. So I was inspired to write a story, which I will submit for contribution. Whether or not it gets into the anthology is up to the fates, and if it doesn't, I would write another story and again until I got the absolute perfect story for this anthology. But I'm so grateful that this anthology existed in the first place, just to give me these thoughts to think. It ended up being science fiction, which is pretty rare for me, and I'm excited to read you a bit of it, that you may in turn perhaps be inspired to back this Kickstarter, which has 5 more days to go. Well, that was 10. 5 more days to go. Okay, so the beginning of my story, As for Peace, Call It Murder, for Brian Shaw. Sing us your love songs now, the soldiers said to the poet Quattromani. She was in no position to sing anything ever again. They had sliced off half her tongue, then seared the wound shut. The others watched from the floor of the arena, huddled masses, etc. Teachers, artists, journalists, religious leaders of every stripe, collar, and headscarf, who had each in their day done equal amounts of good and damage. A few of the wrong sort of politicians, a motley crowd of liberals, left hands hacked off to mark their leanings, and ethical conservatives. Union leaders, anyone in essence who'd opposed the new Supreme Commander's spectacular coup. Ordinary people like Quattromani. Some of the prisoners had even read her poetry, though not all had liked it. Sing us your love songs now, the soldiers taunted her again, and Quattromani, who had only her life left to lose, stood up. She was not very old. Looked older, had never expected to live as long as she had, outgrowing the mute misery of her early years, surviving addiction, solitude, a life on the road exposed and exploited, shoulders knotted under the burden of a terrible, frangible cynicism. Had never expected to learn to love herself and what lay beyond herself, to enjoy that unimaginable ambition, maturity. Nevertheless, there she was. I am of age, she thought. I have lived long enough. Then, it will never be long enough. She looked at the soldiers with a kind of luminous tenderness, with a bitter taste of blackened meat at the back of her throat. Even before she drew the tin whistle from her rags, smiling with broken teeth, before she set the plastic mouthpiece to her crusted lips and played them her last song, the soldiers and teachers and painters and politicians who saw her face and watched that wonder dawn beheld the song before they heard it, before it pierced them and they bowed their heads and prayed. The soldiers executed her the next day. They were the same soldiers who had cut out her tongue and taunted her, the same who had wept and prayed while she played on her whistle, but with enough smokes and six-packs after their shift, with a night of hard, sedated sleep between them and her song, their eyes were sufficiently dry for target practice. They took her to the usual place, the back wall of the arena, and shot her, like they had the others. When Quattromani was still alive and touring, opening for bigger bands, playing bars, performing at house concerts and folk festivals, the song that later enshrined her in our memory wasn't her most popular. But after the soldiers executed her, a few people, the prisoners, the witnesses, recalled to each other the original lyrics attached to that last melody. Or at least, they took time to invent new lyrics just as good, attributing them to her. Many ordinary people are also poets. The name of the song was The Reeling Wall. Anyway, that is how it became known after Quattromani's death, when the other prisoners took to singing it at their own fusillades. The soul is a song, and it ends like a song, when the last breath is drawn at the Paradon. Do you know why we call Quattromani the war ender? I will tell you. But first, I should tell you about the warbirds. And that's what I have. Well, I have a lot more. I have, in fact, a whole finished story. And wait till you hear about the warbirds and all of Quattromani's life, up to the point of her death, and also about what happens after. But for now, go back the Kickstarter, please! Or just tell your friends about it. Thanks so much. Remember, the anthology, Sword and Sonnet, an anthology of battle poets about women and non-binary poets.